regulation should be just saying statute.
Going on. Yes, good afternoon and welcome to the July meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee here at Towcester. On the agenda, item 1, apologies for absence and appointment of substitute members, please.
We have apologies from Councillor Catherine Russell and Councillor Rosie Humphreys, with Councillor Harris substituting.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Harris, for substituting. Has any member got a declaration of interest of any matters posted on this agenda? Take that as a no. Right, we have 2 sets of minutes to confirm. The first set are the 21st of May.
There's a couple of amendments to the 21st of May. As planning training had not taken place, Councillor Holland Delamere's presence at committee should show as also present. He did not take place in the discussion, debate and voting on any application. And there's an omission of the attendance. Also present was Councillor Ray Connolly.
Thank you. With those amendments which will be forthcoming, do we agree they're a true record? Thank you. The second set of minutes are for the 18th of June. I don't think there's anything different about those, is there?
No, nothing that I know of, Chair.
Okay, so unless anybody knows any different, we accept that they're a true record and I will sign them accordingly. Thank you very much. Right, Chair's announcements. I don't have any announcements, I don't believe. So under the Openness of Local Government Bodies Regulation 2014, members of the public or those party to the meeting are permitted to film, broadcast or report on the meeting subject to the efficient running of the meeting not being affected. Only those people who have registered in line with the committee's speaking procedure can address the committee. Those speaking are not permitted to ask questions of either members or officers. Members of the public are requested not to call out during the committee's discussion on any item. All speakers will have 5 minutes in which to make their statement. Participants addressing the planning committee will be advised when they have 60 seconds of their allotted time remaining and will be expected to cease talking immediately on being advised that their time is up. Speakers may be asked to remain seated after they have addressed the committee to answer questions from the planning committee members. There are no planned fire drills this afternoon, so if the alarm does sound, it's for real. An evacuation instruction will be given by the democratic officers. The assembly point is at the bottom of the steps on the mount, which is that green hill to my right. Could all electronic devices please be switched off or onto silent mode? For those members using laptops, could I ask them to press F1 on their machines and a blue light will come on indicating that the sound is muted. The meeting will be webcast on the council's corporate YouTube channel. Therefore, when speaking, please use your microphones and bring them close to your mouth. As to the YouTube channel, it won't be apparent who's who on this top table, so I'll introduce the top table too. On my far right is Diana Davis from Democratic Services. On my right is Catherine Hall from Legal. Myself, Phil Bignell, Chairman. On my left is Simon Ellis, Head of Planning. Next along is Nikki Scaife, Head of Major Developments, and Chris Burton, the Planning Officer, who will present this afternoon's application. So without further ado, we'll move on to item 5, which is the land north of South Kilworth Road, Northampton. I ask Chris Burton, the case officer, to present that to us, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members. So this is the development of a solar farm of up to 49.9 megawatts generating capacity and 67 megawatts of battery storage, and it comprises the installation of the solar photovoltaic panels and the associated infrastructure. So the application sits sort of to the south of Kilworth. Looking at that red line, if you look to the northwest, that is all within West Northamptonshire boundary, but we very quickly move into Harbour's authority to the west, but we are all within our authority. The site sits quite well within the Grand Union Canal, so you can see the curvature here. This is the old railway line. Members I met on site, we met at this location. And then there's a small amount of photovoltaics on this side as well. So you compare that to the red line. There's a public footpath running down here, and then there's a public footpath that runs along this location as well. I'll go into more detail on that later. The railway line is a permissive footpath, so there's no explicit right to walk on it, but people are allowed to walk on it. This is the site layout. Pretty standard in terms of photovoltaics. The infrastructure sort of sits down here. So again, members, when we met on the site visit, it's just to the left. This is where the main infrastructure is. You'll notice Soibel Spinney has been retained. So that's the woodland sort of can make out here that runs through the site. In terms of running through this, I want to draw your attention to policy EMV 9, which is the renewables policy for the area. And it sets out 6 criteria for you as members to consider when you're looking at this application. So I want to run through each of those for you now. So the first is the form, character and setting the existing settlement. In this case, we've got Welford, which is the parish council. They've not provided an objection to the application. They have a neighbourhood plan. In the neighbourhood plan, they set out key views that they want addressed. This doesn't affect any of those key views. Then you have South Kilworth, which sits within the neighbouring authority. I've got some LVIA photos to show you. There is a sort of visual presence of the solar farm to some of the properties within South Kilworth. It's about 1 kilometre away from the application site, and ultimately the officer's view there is that the impact is sufficiently mitigated because of the distance from the village and also the mitigatory planting. In terms of heritage assets, you may have noticed in the committee report, we discussed the Gayton planning appeal, which some members may be familiar with. There are comparables here, and extensive heritage work has gone into assessing the Gayton decision, which I would also ask members to note has been judicially reviewed. So that is currently going through the judicial review process, but that was recommended by the Planning Inspectorate for approval, and the Secretary of State then dismissed that appeal. That was because of the impact of the listed bridge and the setting of the listed bridge and the effect the solar farm had on that bridge. This application site has the Grand Union Canal Conservation Area. It also has 2 listed bridges and a listed milestone. You can see the conservation area is in red, and then I unfortunately have this slightly over the top. Sorry, it's hiding one of the pictures. You have 2 bridges, but both very similar in terms of brick construction, and obviously the milestone, which you can just see down in that bottom corner, which is quite small. In terms of setting, members on the site visit will note that at Gayton, the conservation area, the Grand Union Canal and the bridge sat below the site. So while you were on the Gayton site, you could look into and see the bridge, you could see the Grand Union Canal. This is different in topography. The site drops away. So the Grand Union Canal sits above the site. It's well screened. And while you're on the bridges, you don't have the perception of the solar farm. It's covered by the tree cover and the hedgerows. Your heritage officer has come back, and your officers concur with that there is less than significant harm to the heritage asset. As there's less than significant harm, you as members then are steered to consider the public benefit of the scheme versus the less than significant harm. And the less than significant harm was found to be at the very low end of that harm. That harm is because there are glimpsed views of the solar panels through the trees, which would be slightly exacerbated in winter, but there will be, say, a very low threshold of harm. Then when you say consider that to the Gayton decision, where you're looking sort of onto and the solar farms sit around and above the bridge. In this case, your officers and heritage officers have found there not to be similarities between the 2 cases, and that's why, on terms of heritage harm, we feel that the benefit of the solar panels outweighs the harm produced to the heritage asset. In terms of biodiversity and ecology, there's a significant biodiversity gain. I think it's quite standard for solar farms to produce this significant gain. It's currently arable 3B farmland. There's screening proposed. There'll be some light use as agriculture. So there'll be sheep that go under the panels and graze. However, the number of sheep is obviously significantly reduced from that if it was an agricultural field for livestock. There'll be wildflower meadow planting. I say quite a lot of hedgerow planting and screening as well. The policy also steers us to consider landscape, and that includes the cumulative impact of the existing renewable developments around us. So there are wind turbines that members would have seen on site. They sit within I think the next district, but they were visible while we were walking around the Grand Union Canal. On this map, you can see solar farms that have been marked on. There's no major solar farms. They're the largest is about 20 megawatts. So there's a couple at sort of 49 megawatts, etc. But they are a considerable distance away and sort of drift towards Northampton or Leicester. So in terms of cumulative landscape impact, your officers don't think that there is an overabundance of solar in this immediate vicinity. This is an LVIA with a mock-up of the solar farm. This is taken from the entrance where we met for the site visit. So this is looking, if you're looking at the permissive railway path to the right of that path, this sort of goes up towards the U shape, if you're looking that way of the Grand Union Canal. This is from South Kilworth. You can probably just about make out the blue there, which is the solar panels. So that's about 1 kilometre away from the application site. This is after 10 years of the mitigatory planting being in situ. So there will continue to be a perception of that solar farm even after 10 years. And this is taken from the Grand Union Canal. There is enhanced planting proposed. So if you look to your sort of the right of the screen, you can see the solar panels. Members on the site visit will have remembered there were certain areas where there was slightly threadbare hedgerow. So all of that is proposed for additional planting, but for the most part, it's pretty dense. But I would say that, especially in winter, there will be a perception of the solar farm being next to you, but it very much is a gentle perception. It's not on top of you, and it's glimpsed through gaps in the hedgerow. Obviously, we went round in the summer, so it was a lot more sort of verdant, shall we say. But even then, I think there will occasionally be glimmers of the solar farm through, but it's very much glimpsed as opposed to an obvious part of the setting of the Grand Union Canal. And this is taken of the neighbouring residential property. So this is looking across, I think, from the permissive footpath, the railway line, looking up to the property. So the solar farm, the first solar panels are about 37.5 metres away from that property. So this is residential amenity. This is another aspect for members to consider under the policy. This is the neighbouring residential property, red line of the application site, and then the solar panels. So say those solar panels are 37.5 metres away from that property. There is currently a relatively extensive hedgerow, especially along this part of the site, but also in the back garden of the property. I'd certainly say there would be a view of the solar farm for that property. The applicant is happy if a further condition was requested by members to require further planting, but the current mitigatory planting is all within the applicant's ownership, very mature. And if we look back at this, you can see sort of thick hedgerow, large trees. So it's within the applicant, the current residential ownership, but the applicant is happy to say further enhance that if that is something members want to explore. In terms of residential harm, you'll have noted from the committee report, the public objection. It will be perceived from the current residential dwelling, but of course a view is not a protected characteristic in terms of planning, though residential amenity and oppressiveness would be. It's slightly crude comparable, but one I'd draw members to is if we were looking at a housing scheme here, we'd be looking at 21 metres from sort of a window to window. Obviously, a solar farm is lower in terms of its height, sort of looking about 3 metres, and you don't have that then perception of overlooking coming back into you. But it would be wrong to say that it wouldn't be perceived from the residential property that's here. So another part of discussion of the policy is impact on the public rights of way. Members will remember the DU4. So on our site visit, we walked along the railway line here. We then joined DU2 very briefly, followed the towpath round, walked across DU4, then followed the towpath round back to DU23. DU4 will remain active, open throughout the construction and during the lifetime of the proposed application. There will be an impact on DU4, especially because you'll now be walking between rows of solar farms. However, the impact is short, and going on the Great Worth appeal that that was allowed by the inspector, which has also been judicially reviewed. The opinion being that solar farms are becoming part of the agricultural landscape. It's something that we have to expect to see in agriculture now, much as we now have to expect to see, steel frame barns in certain locations. Officer's view is that the impact is very short. It's broken up by the Spinney because you walk through the woodland for part of it as well. So yes, it will have an impact on DU4, but that impact is limited. There are some very gentle views in from DU2 as well, if you were standing up near Welford Lodge Farm, but again, very much mitigated by the dense planting around the Grand Union Canal. So members, I leave you with the site layout. I say that the main policy for us to consider is ENV9. Obviously, we have to consider all policies in the development plan, but that is your renewables policy. Having assessed it and weighed up get the planning balance in terms of the provision of solar farm, renewable energy, the number of homes that will benefit from the renewables versus the impacts, specifically really on the landscape and of the neighbouring residential property, it is your office's view that in the planning balance, this application should be recommended for approval. Thank you, members.
Yes, thank you for the presentation, Chris. It's now members' opportunity to ask Chris any questions, and I emphasise questions of his presentation so far. Anybody got any questions of the presentation? Yes, Charles, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, could you just confirm South Kilworth? There was a note in the report about July the 9th, there was going to be a meeting. And just in terms of taking one step back, because it's a neighbouring authority, do we not need to consult with them through this in terms of due process and the statutory guidelines in terms of time limits?
I'd have to defer to Catherine in terms of they're a statutory consultee, but the neighbouring authority was contacted and hasn't responded. South Kilworth Parish Council were contacted back in April when I realised that their own authority hadn't contacted them. They got back to me and said they were going to have a parish meeting on July the 9th, and I did press them, and I pressed them again on Thursday for their comments, Thursday just gone, and I haven't received any commentary from them.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Councillor Manners, could you just repeat that last part of that question for me?
Well, I'm
please?
just interested when we come up with neighbouring authorities, applications of neighbouring authorities, the people there, the residents there should have as much rights in terms of consultation as residents in our district. The fact that it's a neighbouring district, it shouldn't preclude them. And what worries me is that it seems that they have been consulted. It seems that they haven't actually come back, but I'm just interested in where this sits in terms of principle.
My expectation is that we would contact the neighbouring authority, which we have done. It would then be a matter for the neighbouring authority to expand that consultation to residents. That would be my expectation. And so how they then manage that would be a matter for the neighbouring authority, not for ourselves. But I do appreciate that, you know, it's not specifically the neighbouring authority that's having the issue. It's the people that live nearby that boundary to the development that in an ideal world would have an opportunity to feed into this. But with the lack of feedback from the neighbouring authority, we don't know what they have done on that front. I suspect we don't have a record of anything from them. Is that correct?
That's correct. Our admin team received no response, and I even went on their sort of AI chat page and asked to speak to planning and didn't get through. I would say that the majority of the objections have come from South Kilworth, so it has obviously got around South Kilworth in terms of, I couldn't tell you how many, but I'd say the vast majority of those objections have come from South Kilworth, so it's clearly known in South Kilworth. I think the applicant did undertake quite extensive consultation themselves before the application went in, including speaking to both villages. So they would have also been aware via the statement of community involvement that South Kilworth had been consulted. It might be a question to ask the applicant at their time as well, but ultimately it's our policies that determine the application, not the neighbouring authorities. So it would be our policies that the neighbouring authority would have to comment on as well in terms of impact.
Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to some of the photographs that you showed, some of the hedges were quite short. I know it's a small point, but at the same token, presumably these hedges will be allowed to grow to such an extent that it actually shields the solar farm.
So one of the conditions would be the landscape environmental management plan, and that would be a sort of a full scale, I suppose, description of exactly what's going to be planted, to what height, how will it be managed, when will it be cut. So yes, it would, councillor, be part of that condition to make sure that the proposed management of the hedgerow works, because obviously you don't want something that's 6 meters tall and just blocks out all light, and the flip side, you need it to be dense enough and thick enough to make sure it does do the mitigatory work. Unfortunately, due to the sheer size of the solar farms, there's only so much the mitigatory planting can do. So there's no way that the whole site can sort of be obviated from the public view via the mitigation, but it certainly would be improved by the planting proposed.
Thank you, officer.
Yes, Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Yes, just one comment. You mentioned that the applicant has suggested there could be further consideration for planting or screening. Obviously, we've got in front of us comments from the residents of Cybole, which is the nearest farm and nearest residence that is impacted by it. Unfortunately, having read these comments, most of these don't appear to be planning related matters, but clearly there is likely to be an impact to them as residents nearby. So I just wondered if you could give any further guidance on what discussions have taken place in regards to any other potential screening or anything of that nature. Obviously, the risk is that they just become completely screened in, which again probably defeats the object, but it would be useful to know what conversations have taken place if possible.
So with regards to the applicant is in their sort of layout, what's shown here is sort of wildflower meadow planting. The applicant is happy to change that as per recommendation from the local authority in terms of, say, enhancing that. That would again be controlled by the landscape management plan as well, in terms of setting heights to make sure it doesn't become fully overgrown. Obviously, the applicant has a very mature hedgerow and tree line within their own border as well, which gives them a degree of control. We're not in a position where we're telling an applicant, oh, in 10 years' time, there will be mitigatory screening, where there is a good degree of mitigatory screening already in place for them. So the applicants expressed a happiness to work with the resident and the local authority in terms of enhancing and putting what would be best sort of placed for the applicant on there. But I obviously understand the applicant currently has a long view, which is then would be curtailed if we planted a load of Leylandii or conifers across it. So it's getting that balance right for the applicant. And I say a lot of that can be controlled through the landscape management plan. We could add a separate condition, but it might be unnecessary because the landscape management plan could also encapsulate, and we could put an informative on potentially saying that the landscape management plan needs to encapsulate that part of the mitigatory planting as well.
Any more questions? Yes, Councillor Manners again.
Thank you, Chair. I noted in the report the conditions on the lighting that you've put in. Can you just confirm where the lighting will take place, presumably at the battery station?
I don't think there is actually any proposed lighting at the moment. It's just sort of, it covers off that base. If, as the sort of further details are added, anything becomes apparent to the local authority they need to control. I just need to check the full wording of the condition.
I mean, I'm happy to ask the applicant. I mean, I'd prefer there was absolutely no lighting.
So I say I don't think there is any proposed lighting, but it's more we've now got control if any lighting is suddenly proposed for us to review it. There may be some very low lighting at the immediate entrance for the infrastructure, but nothing excess is required, no floodlighting, etc. is required for the running of the application. And it may be if they do require some small low-level lighting, we can look to have it as sort of on a timer or motion sensor, so it only turns on at those moments. It also helps in terms of ecology, not that I think anything of worry has been found, but if there were bats, etc., it gives us that element of control further down the line to make sure that the Grand Union Canal isn't illuminated by any lighting, etc.
You might want to have that for the agent when he speaks. Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Yes, I understand that there'll probably be some sheep on this to help keep the grass down in due course. So therefore it's changing from its current arable to livestock. So I would have thought you'd probably need an inner fence going around, which is probably pig netting on posts and a strand of barbed wire on the top. It's quite an extensive length. But when it comes to the boundary around the farm, Cybole Farm, you won't be able to put barbed wire around there at all because horses jump, and especially if they're show jumpers or ex-race horses. And I've had experience of this. And of course, if there's barbed wire there at all, they will end up with a splint or something and eventually be useless. So it needs some careful treatment in the enhancement around Cybole Farm of the fencing there. Probably have to, I don't know which side of the hedge it needs putting, which would be the best side, and it would have to be post and rail fencing around there, and pig netting as well, or sheep netting if you want to call it that, but it's pig netting, it's the official term. I suppose that's something really to go into detail if we put a condition on enhancement around Cybole Farm. But it's worth considering at this stage because there could be a problem. You'd be surprised how a horse that can jump, how high it can jump.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm pleased to say condition 16 requires the agent to provide method statement for fencing. So we do have a condition. I'll make sure that condition firmly wraps that up. I mean, I suppose some of it will also fall upon the existing farm. I mean, obviously their horses currently don't escape into a agricultural field, an arable field. I think the farmer would be quite annoyed if horses are trampling around. So I assume the current farm has something in place to stop the horses getting across anyway, and so it wouldn't entirely fall upon the applicant. But again, that a lot of that could be dealt with in the LEMP. It might be that the type of planting, in terms of sort of something like a thicker, thornier bush could be appropriate to avoid unnecessary fencing in certain locations. But we do have a fencing condition in as well.
Right, thank you. Thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Harris again?
Yes, just one quick one related to the local lead flood authority, which obviously is us. There is an objection still there, and there are some comments in the conditions at the back. Can you elaborate on whether or not we can deal with those issues effectively?
So the objection from the local lead flood authority, it's one requesting further information. It's not a prohibitive objection, as in this does not work. It's sort of more finesse. I think it would be nice to have potentially boxed off and not had an objection from the LLFA, but having reviewed it very carefully, we're happy that it's a small detail matter, which we don't think would prohibit any development. It's showing certain areas of where the swales are going to be, etc. So it's smaller matters, and I think that the way the LLFA run, it says objection, but so would a site that would completely flood in a biblical sense, which obviously we wouldn't put before members because that would be a prohibitive issue that we couldn't overcome via a condition. So in this instance, we think that the objection from the LLFA is one that is reasonable to condition because we know that the principle of the site works and the principle of the site not flooding also works.
Okay, thank you. Any more Right, we now move on to speakers' time. I've had two people register to speak, who's Darren Rolfe, an objector who actually lives at the farm, and Tim Hancock, the applicant. Now, Mr. Rolfe has been unable to attend this afternoon, either virtually or in person due to work commitments. So he sent in a statement to be read. Normally, Democratic Service would read that to you, but it's considered there's some sensitive personal information in there that we wouldn't want to broadcast on YouTube. So I'm going to allow you up to 5 minutes to read that statement in front of you. You're effectively doing your own speaker time for the objector. So this is from the objector, and I'll allow you up to 5 minutes to read that before I call the applicant forward. Thank you. Right, thank you. You would normally have a chance to ask the applicant, sorry, not the applicant, the objector questions. Chris is going to field your questions on his behalf, but before he does that, he's going to give a brief synopsis for the benefit of the applicants at the back. I know this is getting complicated. For the applicants at the back, so they know what was contained in the document, missing out the personal stuff, if that's okay. So quick synopsis from Chris, what's technical in there, then you'll have the chance to ask your questions about what you've read. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I should make it clear, I'm obviously not speaking on behalf of the applicant, and I'm not answering questions on their behalf. I'll be answering your questions on their written submission. So the residential address is surrounded on 3 sides by the solar panels, and obviously the other side being Kilworth Road. So I think the applicant is putting forward that there is going to be an oppressive nature to their residential living. I believe they own this field as well, and there's a number of stables, etc. And the applicant has horses which they use and exercise in that field. The land where the solar farm is proposed has been used for dairy and for cereals. Thank you, Councillor. And that's been as far back as anyone can remember. So this is the removal of good farming land. And that us saying that the land is not good enough for farming is not the case, because it is being used for farming at the moment. The applicant says that the planning portal shows the wrong site address and that site history are incorrect. The planning application refers to the applicant's address, that the site history is that of the residential address, not that of the field. The applicant then goes on to point out that we already have an abundance of renewable energy sources within Northamptonshire. The area is environmentally sensitive and it's been defined as such by the county, and that it shouldn't have industrial use upon it. The canal towpath and old railway line are both important amenities for animals and local people, and that these are sort of connect up to a much wider scope of bridleways and pathways that many people would use and enjoy. And particularly during construction, that this enjoyment will be removed. It's an important wildlife habitat, and the applicant points out a number of wildlife species which are protected, which they've noted, including owls, foxes, muntjac, hedgehogs, hares and badgers, including a wide range of birds as well. They believe that the substation and other industrial necessities are not in keeping with the area and inappropriate for the landscape. They set out they've been informed by the developers that there'll be 70 heavy good vehicle movements a day, and that they assume to be at the lower end of what the real number of heavy good vehicle movements will be, and that the roads are not suitable because South Kilworth has a sharp bend in it, a notoriously sharp bend, and double parking, while the other route goes over a single lane bridge over the canal, and it's a blind bridge as well. They also point out that in their time at the address, 2 cars have driven through their boundary wall because of poor overtaking at the bridge, and that before it was a regular occurrence before they moved in. There's also concern with regards to dog walkers and horse riders on the road, and obviously the impact of meeting someone, an HGV meeting them at the bridge. They state that there's a deficiency in the noise assessment, that no assessment was taken for noise during construction or from the traffic that will be generated, and that as their home is in close proximity, they will be particularly affected by the construction and traffic noise. They set out that there's potentially a deficiency that no assessment of people who are more sensitive to noise has been undertaken. And that no assessment has been taken with regard to foaling mares has been undertaken. The objection then goes on to set out, and I assume these are without prejudice points from the objector. They would like to see the construction hours reduced. So if it were to be taken for approval, that construction on Monday to Friday would be from 8:30 to 17:30 instead of 7:30 to 1800. And they point out that there will be up to 60 to 80 staff working on the application site. They also requested that there's no working hours on Saturday, whereas it's proposed to work from 8 till 1 on Saturdays, and that no construction is taken on bank holidays. They also set out that if there are to be any late deliveries, they take place between 9:30 and 16:30 on Monday to Friday. They also request, because of the potential congestion on the road of 60 to 80 cars, including the HGVs, plus the HGVs, the project should ensure there's adequate space within the site for parking and to make sure that there's no queuing on the road to enter the site.
About it, wasn't it?
Sorry, Chair, the applicant also advances that the application may not have considered protected characteristics in its assessment. So from the objection, those are the planning notes from it.
Okay, thank you. So I'll go for a couple of questions first before we go. We keep hearing about 70 HGVs. What is the number of HGV movements?
Over construction, it's looking at 15 HGVs in, 15 HGVs out day by day. That may peak slightly on some days and drop off on other days. But we're looking at a sort of a cumulative average of 15 HGVs in, 15 HGVs out per day.
So not 70. And the second question is the actual access route. I'm still confused about where things are coming in, going out, which bridge it's going over, what it isn't going over. I'm still not sure where we're going with this one.
The access is a matter to be conditioned, so it'll be part of the construction management plan and the operational traffic management plan. I mean, there's naturally two routes in. One comes through South Kilworth and the other comes off the A14. I've discussed this with the applicant. They're happy to set out the construction management plan and then have discussion with the local authority on the preferred route in. And I say, due to the number of construction vehicles coming in, our highways officers offer no objection on the construction phase.
So when you say South Kilworth, you mean North Kilworth and South Kilworth? They come along the major road at the top, drop down from just before North Kilworth into South Kilworth, I'm guessing. Yeah?
The A304.
That's the one, yeah.
Travel on, yeah.
And nearly into North Kilworth, then drop down to South Kilworth. Okay, thank you. Right, members, I saw Andre start it off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question. There was a point here about blight that was mentioned on the letter. I'm not sure, Chris, whether you picked that up at all, whether that has any relevance whatsoever.
I did, councillor, thank you. House price blight is not a matter for planning consideration. It's obviously a deeply personal matter, but not one that officers can consider or members can consider in their thoughts for the application.
And to you, Mr. Chairman, if I may ask, without drawing too much attention here, there are protected characteristics mentioned. Is that something that we need to discuss offline?
Chris?
Thank you, councillor. So following receipt of this, your officers have been discussing the Equality Act 2010, which makes it a legal requirement to give due regard to the three aims of the general equality duty and its functions as exercised by the council. The detail in front of you is one of disturbance via noise. We have obviously had a noise assessment. We have a noise condition under the equality duty. We've also got to consider things proportionately. Ultimately, a solar farm is as near as silent, and it will be a silent neighbour. There is obviously a slight fallback consideration, which is it's currently an arable field where you will have agricultural heavy machinery. I wouldn't be able to say how often, but there will be agricultural noise. Construction noise is something that will happen. And again, the Equality Act 2010 will be considered as part of the construction management plan, so that the noise impacts of the construction will be considered under the council's duty of the Equality Act to make sure that any impact on noise is duly considered, especially during the construction phase. Ultimately, there's a point of proportionality on this. Your office's assessment is to say that the application is by virtue nearly silent. The construction is relatively intrusive as well. So the way solar farms, and I'm sure the applicant can go into a little bit more detail on this, but they basically have a relatively small bit of machinery that pokes holes, deep holes into the ground as a spike. And then the frame of the panels is dropped into that. And then at a later date, the panels are then attached to that frame. It's a large site. There is a relatively large distance from the existing property as to where the actual panels will be. And I say, as part of the construction management plan, we'd expect the applicant to look into how they would make sure that there's minimised impact during the construction phase on the residential occupants, whether that's agreeing certain times that anything within a close proximity of the site is considered, or sort of certain hours of the day where the works do or do not take place that are in close proximity to the residential address. So your officers are content that under the Equality Act, they have assessed the application.
Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the delivery route, I think you mentioned A14 through the Killis, in which case the HGVs won't be crossing the protected bridge over the canal. So I think maybe we should be in a position to clarify that situation with the objection. That was one of their primary objections, I think.
But the access from the A14, when you turn left before you get into not Kilsby and wherever it is. Yeah, you then turn left down there and there's a bridge at the bottom there before the farm. So they would go over the bridge there. So there's a bridge either side of the entrances.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Although there's a weight limit on that one on the way down, that doesn't apply for how many miles is it? It doesn't, 3.5, which is actually when they get to South Kilworth. So that restriction on that road is not a weight limit before the site, so they can go down there to the site. Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. We made a lot of requirements, or should we say interest, with regards to the traffic that happens during the construction phase. Has actually any anticipation with regards to what traffic is actually after when the solar farm is up and running?
Thank you, Councillor. So following discussion with highways, we're looking at potentially 1 vehicle a month to carry out maintenance, and then occasionally you might have 2 a month to help with cleaning of the panels. So we consider that an improvement, a substantial improvement on the agricultural use that currently could be undertaken at the site.
Thank you, Officer.
Councillor Chandler again.
Yeah, I can confirm with our experience of the solar farm at Yelvertoft, which is now finished and worthy of a visit for anybody who wants to see what they really look like, that I can confirm that estimate of about 1 vehicle a month, and it's not a large vehicle either.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Harris.
Yeah, just one quick comment. Obviously, the resident makes a comment specifically about operational hours during construction. Has that been put to the applicant at all in terms of whether they would be happy with or consider slightly, I mean, they're not dramatically reduced hours that they're looking for or asking for. Has that been asked of the applicant at this stage?
No, Councillor, hasn't been asked yet. It's a matter, I think, to say that's conditioned, and the construction management plan would then set out specific hours. One thing, say, that would have to be considered is, as you start condensing the hours, you start placing more pressure on the road network because they want to get onto site before rush hour. It also prolongs the build, over the course of 6 months, knocking an hour off here and there and not allowing small amounts of Saturday work does actually prolong the build. So I suppose it's also a sort of, would you prefer to have a shorter build period with maybe slightly more disruption? When the construction management comes in, it will be consulted on with not only your highways team, but also your environmental health officers, to make sure that it's fully considered, so that there is that balancing act. And I think the applicant will most probably, when they submit the condition, make representation on the hours they want to advance as well. But it's a bit of a balancing act of how we take it forward.
Thank you. Right, I'll now invite Mr. Hancock to come forward to the Speaker's chair to present to us for 5 minutes. He's brought along 3, I'll call them experts. One's on community engagement, one's on planning, and one's on transport. So when Mr. Hancock gets to the end of his presentation, if you ask him a very difficult question, which he struggles with, he has 3 people at the back who I've allowed to help him answer those questions if necessary. So if you want to just draw the mic close to you when you're ready and got your glasses on, sir. Press the button at the bottom and you'll get 5 minutes, and I'll tell you when 4 are up, sir.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Tim Hancock. I'm a director of the applicant Blenheim Renewables. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk to you today as we seek approval for our application. The Blenheim Renewables development team have over 30 years of experience for renewables, having delivered over 10 gigawatts of solar and wind farms in the UK and elsewhere around the world. Importantly, we build, own and operate our projects for the long term in partnerships with landowners and our host community. In the case of Welford, we're working closely with the landowner, Parkers of Leicester, and the host community, Welford Parish Council. Blenheim also specialises in private wire projects, providing power to large energy users locally rather than simply exporting into the grid. Welford Solar Farm is ideally located to provide power directly to the Daventry International Freight Terminal, the motorway service areas, and proposed HGV charging installations, thereby enabling clean growth. Some of the benefits of our proposal will include the generation of up to 49.9 megawatts of renewable energy, or the equivalent of supplying 14,500 homes, with a saving of 11,500 tonnes of carbon each year. We will help to contribute to meeting the UK's need to reach net zero and help with energy security and affordability. We'll also help to achieve West Northants Climate Emergency Action Plan. The proposals retain and enhance all existing hedgerows and trees wherever possible. We're proposing to create new wildflower meadow and species-rich grassland and hedgerow, which will secure a 110.72 net increase in biodiversity when compared with the existing situation. Our proposals also incorporate a range of measures to enhance wildlife, including bat and bird's nest boxes. We are able to secure a new permissive footpath along the old railway, which has been welcomed by local residents. This is of an informal nature at the moment. We're proposing to formalise that going forward, and that would be forever. It won't just be for the lifetime of the solar farm, it would endure beyond the solar farm. We're not losing any best and most versatile agricultural land on this site, and sheep will continue to be allowed to graze, so the land will continue to be productive. We will actually be helping local farming in the area by diversifying Parker's business operations, which is essential to mitigate the impact of climate change and volatile weather. In total, the investment will be around £30 million and creating about 50 jobs during construction. We intend to employ local contractors and local staff wherever possible. We do, however, recognise that our proposal is a larger project in a rural area, resulting in some significant change locally. We can only locate solar farms where a suitable land area is available and where there is sufficient grid capacity and/or local power users to connect. We have secured a grid connection offer to the Rugby substation, but our intention is to use most of the power to meet the rapidly growing demand from large local energy users in the logistics and transportation sector via a private wire network. We have demonstrated public support through an engagement website and a public exhibition held in Welford Village Hall. The exhibition was attended by 120 residents of Welford, South Kilworth and North Kilworth. Of the 21 feedback forms received, 76% or 16 people supported the proposal, with only 1 objecting. Welford Parish Council are also supportive. We have listened to concerns raised and a scheme has been adapted to address these matters wherever possible. Our proposal has the support of your officers and has no objection from statutory consultees, apart from the lead local flood authority, which can be dealt with by condition. Nevertheless, there have been a small number of objections, mostly from residents of South Kelworth Parish and the neighbouring property Seibow Farm. The public objections relate chiefly to construction traffic and concerns about the 15 HGVs accessing the site each day for the 6-month construction period. I would like to emphasise that it's our intention that these vehicles will not travel through South Kelworth, but will come via the A14, 5199 junction from the east, and then along Northampton Road and South Kelworth Road.
1 minute to go, sir.
Regarding Seibow Farm, our proposal is well screened by the existing mature vegetation, and as your officer said, the nearest panel is some 13.7 metres away. We have offered additional planting on our site, which can be secured by condition if necessary. In summary, the solar farm represents a sustainable development for which there is national and local plan and policy support. It will contribute to the Council's Climate Emergency Action Plan and objectives for decarbonisation. The proposal will result in some adverse impact on the Grand Union Canal listed bridges, local viewpoints and footpaths. However, these effects are addressed through the mitigation measures which can be secured through planning conditions. As your officer has explained, any limited harm is outweighed by the many benefits of our proposal. In conclusion, we very much hope that you will support your officer's recommendation today. Thank you, Chairman.
Excellent timing, sir. I know at least one of the members has a question before here, so Councillor Manners.
Can you confirm there's no lighting on the site? No lighting.
There will be no external lighting on the site. That's correct. We will have CCTV cameras at certain points around the site, and they will be infrared, so no lighting is required whatsoever.
And have you had any discussions with the Rolfs at Seibow Farm?
We have. We met with the Rolfs before Christmas, before we submitted the planning application. We met them at the public exhibition when they expressed concern. So we offered to go and meet them, which we did. And we did at that meeting offer additional planting. So we are willing and able to provide some additional planting within our boundary, to try and help with their concerns about mitigation. On the subject of construction noise, we really don't think this is an issue, certainly during operation. And during construction, we can be sensitive to the property itself. We wouldn't ideally like to have construction hours restricted. What we could consider is the effect on that part of the site, and maybe limiting construction around the edges of the farm to the hours that they're suggesting.
Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. Will you be making an annual contribution to the local parish council as per some other solar farms do?
This is not a material planning consideration, I'm afraid, but we have had discussions with the parish council, and I think your officer is aware of those.
Will you be making a contribution?
We will be, but it cannot be a planning consideration. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chalner.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. You mentioned a private wire network to deliver energy to Durft. Will that be overhead or underground?
It will be underground, definitely underground.
Any more questions? Yes, Councillor Harris.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned you won't be using the Kilworths from an access point of view for construction, but A145199. Would it be possible to include in any traffic management plan, if this were to be approved, that they reverse that route and do not go through Welford up to Husbands Bosworth and back across to the M6 or any other direction? You may know Welford itself is quite a bottleneck, and they have had quite a lot of problems and challenges in the past, and it is a diversionary route in the event of problems on the A14 and the M1, and there's nothing much anyone can do about that. Fundamentally, if there's a problem, they have to use that route. But any additional traffic through Welford would be frowned upon for sure. So if you could make a note of that and maybe consider that as part of the plan. I believe they have other arrangements already in place for some other parts of sites in Leicestershire for the same reasons.
I think that's absolutely right. We are very sensitive to the concerns that have been raised about traffic through the local villages. This was something that was discussed at the public exhibition. So as I say, our intention is to bring traffic directly off the A14 to avoid any of the settlements. But this is something that will be in the construction environmental management plan and subject to discussion with your highway authority.
Thank you. Yes, I think we're done. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Hancock. You return to your seat, and we didn't
Thank you,
need your
Chair.
experts, so thank you for bringing them along. Right, Chris, any feedback following the two presentations?
It's just a further point out to members whether a payment's been set up for the parish council or not. It's very strongly not a material consideration for you to consider at all.
I quite like the idea of limiting the work around the farm, you know, in the hours when it's most likely to annoy, I suppose. Trying to paraphrase what it's saying, I thought that was quite a clever idea from the applicant. If that could be incorporated somewhere, that would be excellent, rather than just pull the time down, because all that does is make it actually longer in terms of construction phase, doesn't it?
Chair, if the committee were minded to approve, we could make contact, I suppose, with the farm as well and help flesh out maybe that condition slightly in the next couple of days.
I think that would be an excellent idea, Chris. Thank you. Right, we're now into open debate, and Councillor Harris.
Yeah, before that was just that comment again, if we can make sure that point is picked up about the traffic management plan, I appreciate that will be developed separately. But any additional traffic through Welford will be a significant problem. So can we make sure that if it goes in that way, it comes out that way? Okay.
Right, debate time. Is there any debate? Have we flushed out everything we want to flush out? Yes, Councillor.
Chairman, I'd like to start the debate in terms of construction hours, and we've just obviously heard from the applicant who's considering the opportunity or the ability of not constructing very close to the perimeter of that house or the farm, Subtall Farm. At reasonable, I think we should certainly be expressing that and as a condition, and certainly putting some sort of condition that effectively would preclude any disruption or noise to a reasonable time of the day, as they are able to construct. It's quite a large site, as we know, and therefore that would be the area that would be constructed during reasonable hours. That's probably sort of more daytime hours, and I know that flexes between winter and summer.
Okay, thank you. Are you happy with that, Chris? That condition, or do you want to put more flesh on it, or what are we talking about?
No, I think we're happy with that, Chair. So if we if members were minded to approval, we will, before the issuing of a decision, look to make contact with Sidewall Farm to discuss that. If we're unable to, then we will let it fall back onto the construction management plan, so that there's still the ability to capture the condition, and we'll then add an informative onto the application, so that the applicant is aware when they submit their construction management plan for approval that needs to have been considered within it. So there's two ways of capturing that, so make sure we don't miss out on that opportunity.
Thank you. Any more? Yes, Councillor Harris again.
Yeah, just a couple of comments and observations, really. Colleagues will know that I'm generally of a position where carbon reduction is clearly something I've championed and been quite vocal about at council. And I just want to emphasise that this application, as in any other application I've looked at independently with an open mind in terms of thinking about the issues surrounding the application. I think that's important to say at the outset. There is always a balance to be had, and then there's a wide debate still taking place around food security and energy security. And that debate will continue, I'm pretty sure. I think it's fair to say that we do need to be mindful of that in the future as we see more of these come through. But if you look at the statistics of solar farm coverage, it's still very insignificant in comparison to agricultural coverage and usage in the country. I think it's also fair to say that I've probably made this point before, but there's more golf courses than there are solar farms taking up land use. So I think that's worth bearing in mind. The thing I would also like to mention is I note some of the changes that are happening with government already. I hope they move swiftly. There's lots of debate and comment about roof solar. That's definitely the way to go rather than on land utilisation. And I hope that comes through from a building regulation point of view at some point in the future. So I just wanted to make those comments. It's a fine balance always to be made, and I think we need to look at this on its merits or otherwise. Thank you.
Councillor Parker, please.
Yeah, I propose to accept officer's advice.
Do we have a seconder? That was Councillor Pritchard, I saw. Yes, please, I'm just get them.
I mean, I fully support, I support the application. I think it is finely balanced, but I do think the impact on Skyball Farm is significant. And I do want real consultation, please, with them through you, Chris. I think as a general point, I do think that these developments, and we are going to see many more of them coming through. If the residents who are directly impacted were to get a reduction in their power, utility bills, it would make the whole thing much more palatable. And that is where we've got to join that up. And I know we can't organise that in this meeting, but I do think it would be a point to make generally. Other than that, I'm supportive of this application.
Okay. Oh, saw Simon heard that. Chris.
Sorry, Chair, just to jump in there, Councillor, I'm afraid there's a High Court decision which means we cannot place any weight on any of those matters. So appreciating that it is obviously a nice thing that the courts have directed us that they are not to be considered in the planning balance.
Well, I'm not really interested in what the High Court is saying. I think the new government and the new way we need to get these policies through and actually accept the whole carbon and climate changes. It would make it much more palatable. I'm not denying what you're just saying, and I'm not talking about contributions to parish councils, which I think are admirable. I'm talking actual people's utility bills coming down.
I believe my legal friend on my right wants to speak now.
Just through you, Chair, just as an aid memoir for members generally on the committee this afternoon, we are dealing with a planning application. We need to deal with it on its merits and the submissions that you've heard this afternoon, and the relevant planning policies and procedures.
Right, are we happy to move to a vote on this now? We flush this one out? Those in favour of
Sorry.
yeah, I have already. Ken Pritchard's a seconder. He seconded it ages ago, before Charles spoke.
Chair, if I may just confirm that what we're looking at is officer recommendation with amended conditions.
Yep.
Just so everyone's clear.
Or construction, yeah. Or near the house and in cooperation with the farm in effect. And traffic management. All those in favour of that, considering those, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you for that. There being no other business, I close this meeting at 12 minutes past 3, and thank you all for your attendance. Thank you.